Benson once sold America a sharp, clever comedy about power, politics, and laughter, but fast forward to 2026, and the cast's real lives tell a far darker story. Behind those familiar faces were shattered marriages, abrupt disappearances, and futures rewritten far from the spotlight. Now, let's look closer into the chapters no one ever told you. Robert Guillaume as Benson Dubois. Robert Guillaume was born on November 30th, 1927, in St. Louis, Missouri. At 52 years old, he played Benson Dubois, the sharp-tongued butler who outgrew service and entered power in Benson. The role reshaped the series, turning a sitcom into a pointed political comedy. That calm authority on screen was built against a far harsher beginning. Guillaume was born Robert Peter Williams to a mother diagnosed with alcoholism who abandoned him and his siblings while they were still children. He was raised by his grandmother in a crowded household with limited income and strict routines. School and music became structure, not escape, and that discipline later surfaced in demanding stage roles such as Porgy and Bess and Guys and Dolls. Marriage tested the same discipline. Guillaume married Marlene Williams in 1955, and they raised two sons while his career accelerated through soap and then Benson. Long filming schedules and constant touring created distance that neither repaired nor exploded. The marriage ended quietly in 1984. He later had a daughter from another relationship before marrying Donna Brown in 1986. A union that finally brought steadiness as his career expanded into voice work, including The Lion King. Health intervened without warning. In January 1999, while filming Sports Night, Guillaume suffered a stroke during production. Speech and movement were affected enough to halt work and force months of rehabilitation. Recovery was slow and controlled, and the experience reshaped the calm gravity he brought to later performances, both on screen and behind a microphone. Sadly, he died on October 24, 2017, at 89 years old from prostate cancer at his home in Los Angeles. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated at around $5 million, built through 5 decades of stage, television, and voice work. His legacy endures through characters who spoke softly, thought sharply, and never needed excess to command attention. James Noble as Governor Eugene X. Gatling. James Noble was born on March 5, 1922, in Dallas, Texas. At 57 years old, he played Governor Eugene X. Gatling, the well-meaning but limited executive, in Benson. His performance anchored the series, allowing political satire to land. That gentle foolishness masked a life shaped by discipline and interruption. Noble studied engineering and acting at Southern Methodist University, but his education was interrupted by World War II when he enlisted in the U.S. Navy. Military service imposed routine, silence, and pressure, shaping a temperament built on endurance rather than ambition. After the war, he rebuilt slowly through theater and soap operas, including As the World Turns. Marriage became his emotional center. Noble married actress Carolyn Coates in 1956, and their relationship lasted nearly 50 years. While his career moved between steady work in 1776 and being there, home remained fixed. When Coates died in 2005, that balance collapsed, and Noble withdrew from public life, carrying grief without performance. His health followed the same quiet decline. In March 2016, Noble suffered a severe stroke, leaving him hospitalized and weakened within days. The damage was rapid and irreversible, ending a life defined by consistency rather than spectacle. His body failed faster than his career ever had. Finally, he passed away on March 28, 2016, at 94 years old, due to complications from a stroke. His net worth was estimated at around $1 million, reflecting a career built on steady work, not celebrity peaks. In Benson, he played power as innocence. In life, he carried it with restraint until the end. Inga Swenson as Gretchen Wilhelmina Krauss. Inga Swenson was born on December 29, 1932, in Omaha, Nebraska. At 47 years old, she played Gretchen Wilhelmina Krauss, the formidable German cook and later head housekeeper, in Benson. Her performance gave the series its sharpest edge, turning humor into authority and making Gretchen one of the show's most unforgettable forces. That iron control was learned early. Swenson was the youngest of 3 children, and her life changed abruptly at age 15 when her father was killed in a car accident. The loss forced maturity and discipline, pushing her deeper into music and performance as structure rather than escape. While studying drama and vocal training, she moved constantly for education and work, laying the groundwork for demanding stage roles such as Lizzie Curry in 110 in the Shade and Irene Adler in Baker Street. Marriage brought both stability and quiet sorrow. Swenson married actor and singer Lowell Harris in 1953, and the couple had 2 sons, Mark and James. Their partnership endured the pressures of Broadway, touring, and later television success on Benson, where Swenson appeared in 158 episodes. But in 1987, tragedy struck when her son James died in a motorcycle accident at age 26, a loss that permanently altered the emotional balance of her life. Grief did not stop her work, but it reshaped it. Swenson continued acting through the late 1980s and 1990s, including appearances in North and South while carrying a private weight rarely visible on screen. Eventually, she stepped away from acting in 1998, choosing distance over exposure as the industry continued without her. Inga Swenson died on July 23, 2023, at 90 years old in Los Angeles, following complications related to advanced age. No public cause was formally announced, and she was remembered quietly. At the time of her passing, her net worth was estimated at around $2 million, earned through decades of stage, film, and television work. Missy Gold, as Katie Gatling. Missy Gold was born on July 14, 1970, in Great Falls, Montana. At 9 years old, she played Katie Gatling, the governor's daughter, in Benson. Her presence grounded the series emotionally, giving political satire a human center through a child's perspective. That childhood came with pressure. Gold was born into a family of working actors, with sisters already established in television. From an early age, she balanced school with auditions and long shooting schedules. Appearances in shows like 8 is Enough and Fantasy Island filled her formative years, replacing routine with responsibility before adolescence had fully begun. As she grew older, the strain became clearer. Gold continued on Benson for its full run, appearing in 158 episodes, but resisted long-term contracts that would lock her into adult television roles. Acting had defined her youth, yet she chose not to let it define her adulthood. Stepping away meant uncertainty, distance from fame, and the challenge of rebuilding an identity outside performance. Health forced another reckoning. In 2004, Gold was diagnosed with breast cancer, a shock that interrupted her academic path but did not end it. Treatment followed, recovery came slowly, and the experience redirected her purpose. She returned to school, earning degrees from Georgetown University and later a Ph.D. in psychology, transforming survival into vocation. Today, Missy Gold is 56 years old and lives a private life in Maine under her birth name, Melissa Fisher. She works as a licensed psychologist, focusing on healing rather than performance. Her estimated net worth is around $1 million, drawn from early acting residuals and her professional practice. Katie Gatling was her beginning, but not her ending. René Auberjonois as Clayton Runnymede Endicott III. René Auberjonois was born on June 1, 1940, in New York City. At 40 years old, he played Clayton Runnymede Endicott III, the polished, manipulative chief of staff, in Benson. The role sharpened the show's political tension, giving power a refined but unsettling face. That refinement was shaped by constant displacement. Auberjonois spent his childhood moving between Paris, London, and New York, following his journalist father's assignments. By his teens, he had already changed schools and countries multiple times, learning to adapt quickly but never fully settle. Theater became the one constant, leading him to formal training and early stage work that later surfaced in demanding roles like Coco and The Good Doctor. Marriage offered stability, but not escape from difficult choices. Auberjonois married Judith Mihaly in 1963, and they raised 2 children while his career expanded across Benson and later Star Trek, Deep Space Nine. Their partnership endured decades of travel and work, yet it was tested when illness entered the home. Even as he voiced characters in The Little Mermaid and built a second iconic legacy as Odo, private strain quietly grew. Illness arrived with clarity and consequence. In 2018, Auberjonois was diagnosed with lung cancer, and within a year it had metastasized to the brain. Faced with severe cognitive risks, he declined aggressive treatment. Under California law, he chose medical aid in dying, a decision made deliberately to avoid prolonged suffering. Sadly, he died on December 8, 2019, at 79 years old, from metastatic lung cancer, at his home in Los Angeles. He spent his final hours with family, listening to music and revisiting photographs. His net worth was estimated at around $5 million, earned through stage mastery, television longevity, and voice work. Control, dignity, and choice defined both his characters and his end. Ethan Phillips as Pete Downey. Ethan Phillips was born on February 8, 1955, in Garden City, New York. At 25 years old, he played Pete Downey, the fast-talking public relations man in Benson. The character added speed and chaos to the series, amplifying its political satire through nervous energy. That energy was shaped by early pressure. Phillips grew up on Long Island, the son of a restaurant owner with expectations of stability rather than art. Acting began off-Broadway, where competition was constant and recognition uncertain. Small theater roles and early performances preceded television work, while films like Critters followed later, slowly building momentum. Marriage brought balance as fame expanded. Phillips married Patricia Cresswell in 1990, and together they raised 3 daughters while his career evolved. After Benson, he stepped into a radically different identity as Neelix on Star Trek, Voyager, a role that demanded emotional range and sustained visibility for 6 seasons. Health tested that balance years later. Phillips faced a serious breast cancer diagnosis in 2004, forcing treatment and a pause in work. Recovery reshaped priorities rather than ending ambition. He returned selectively, combining screen work with extensive voice acting and theater, including later film appearances such as The Purge, Election Year. Today, Ethan Phillips is 71 years old and remains active in acting, theater, and voice work. His estimated net worth is around $3 million, built steadily rather than explosively. Pete Downey was a beginning, but endurance, not speed, defined the career that followed. Didi Conn as Denise Stevens. Didi Conn was born on July 13, 1951, in Brooklyn, New York. At 30 years old, she played Denise Stevens, the bright, romantic secretary who brought warmth and impulse into the governor's world, in Benson. Denise softened the show's political bite, because her optimism made the cynicism hit harder. That sweetness was not raised in comfort. Conn grew up in a home where money was tight, and she learned early that childhood could include work. She took jobs young to help the household, and that pressure trained her to perform on command. It also explains why her earliest break came through voice work, including Raggedy Ann and Andy, a musical adventure, 1977, where precision mattered more than fame. Fame arrived fast, and love didn't survive the speed. Conn married Frank Conn in 1975, then divorced in 1978, right as her public profile was rising with Grease, 1978. The timing cut deep, because she was becoming Frenchy to the world while her private life was falling apart. When she later married composer David Shire in 1984, The relationship carried a different weight, less glamour, more responsibility. Then motherhood turned into a lifelong mission. Conn and Shire raised a son, Daniel, who was diagnosed with autism, and the reality reshaped their home. Stress became daily, not dramatic, and it demanded endurance rather than tears. Conn leaned into advocacy, becoming a national spokesperson for autism awareness, while still returning to performance in projects like Grease Live, 2016, and even pushing herself onto the ice for Dancing on Ice, 2019, at age 67. Now Didi Conn is 75 years old and continues to appear selectively on stage and screen while remaining active in autism-related advocacy. Her estimated net worth is around $2 million, built from decades of acting, Broadway work, and long-running recognition from Grease and Benson. Denise Stevens was the character who believed in people, and Conn spent her real life trying to prove that belief wasn't naive. It was necessary. Caroline McWilliams as Marcy Hill. Caroline McWilliams was born on April 4, 1945, in Seattle, Washington. At 34 years old, she played Marcy Hill, the poised political figure whose presence raised the stakes inside the governor's orbit, in Benson. Marcy made the comedy feel closer to real power because she moved like someone who understood consequences. That confidence came from discipline, not luck. McWilliams grew up in a structured environment and pushed hard through training, graduating from Carnegie Mellon University in 1966. The pressure was intense, and it shaped her into a performer who could survive long schedules and constant scrutiny. She broke through on daytime television in Guiding Light, 1969 to 1975, then moved into primetime roles that demanded sharper edges, including Soap, 1978. Her marriage carried the same strain as her career. McWilliams married Michael Keaton in 1982, and they had a son, Sean, but two demanding careers created a quiet collision. Time became the enemy, not scandal, and the relationship ended in divorce in 1990. Even as her personal life fractured, she kept working, appearing in films like Mermaids, 1990, while continuing steady television roles. Illness arrived in the background and refused to leave. McWilliams battled multiple myeloma, a cancer that drains the body slowly and relentlessly. The disease tightened her world, forcing treatment, fatigue, and a private fight that most audiences never saw. She kept going as long as she could, but the ending was not negotiable. Caroline McWilliams died on February 11, 2010, at 64 years old, at her home in Los Angeles, from multiple myeloma. She was remembered with respect more than spectacle, and no widely noted burial detail dominated the public narrative. Her estimated net worth was around $1 million, reflecting a career built on steady, serious work rather than blockbuster wealth. Marcy Hill was a role about power, but McWilliams' real story was about endurance, until endurance finally ran out. Billie Bird as Rose Cassidy. Billie Bird was born on February 28, 1908, in Pocatello, Idaho. At 76 years old, she played Rose Cassidy, the sharp-tongued elderly presence who injected hard-earned realism into the governor's household, in Benson. Her role reminded the series that age did not weaken authority, it sharpened it. That authority came from a childhood without protection. Orphaned at 8 years old, Bird grew up in an orphanage where survival depended on being noticed. She was discovered performing as a child and pushed into vaudeville, touring relentlessly before adolescence ended. Comedy became instinct, not craft, and decades later that instinct resurfaced in film roles like 16 Candles and Home Alone, where timing mattered more than dialogue. Marriage gave her the first sense of permanence. Bird married Edwin Sellon, and together they raised 3 children, maintaining a stable home until his death in 1966. While her peers faded, Bird kept working, appearing in Benson for 17 episodes and later becoming a familiar face in television comedies such as Dear John. Stability came late, but she held on to it. Illness slowly erased what experience had built. Bird lived for years with Alzheimer's disease, a condition that dismantled memory piece by piece. The woman known for precision and recall lost the very tools that had sustained her career. Work stopped long before life did, and silence replaced punchlines. Finally, she died on November 27, 2002, at 94 years old in Granada Hills, California, from complications related to Alzheimer's disease. She was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park. Her estimated net worth was around $500,000, modest but earned through nearly half a century of persistence. Rose Cassidy was not nostalgia. She was survival, spoken aloud. Louis J. Stadlen as John Taylor. Louis J. Stadlen was born on March 7, 1947, in Brooklyn, New York. At 32 years old, he played John Taylor, the governor's original chief of staff, in Benson. The role established the show's political framework before being abruptly cut short. That confidence was trained, not inherited. Stadlen studied under Sanford Meisner and Stella Adler, absorbing discipline through repetition and criticism. Broadway came early, with Minnie's Boys earning him a Tony nomination, followed by demanding stage work that shaped his precision. Theater defined his identity long before television tested it. Conflict entered when ambition met limitation. Stadlen clashed with producers over character direction during Benson's first season, feeling the role had nowhere left to go. He requested release from his contract, a rare move that cost him visibility but preserved autonomy. Replacement came swiftly, and Stadlen returned to the stage, later re-emerging in productions like The Producers. Work continued, but on his own terms. Stadlen balanced stage and screen appearances, including The Sopranos and Law and Order, while committing primarily to theater. Marriage followed a similar pattern, first to Kathleen Gray, later to marry Dolphine McLeod, with children anchoring a life built on control rather than compromise. As of 2026, Louis J. Stadlen is 79 years old and remains active in theater and occasional screen work. His estimated net worth is around $1 million, earned steadily through decades on stage rather than television fame. John Taylor was a beginning, not a loss. The exit was deliberate, and the career that followed was intentional. David Hedison as John Taylor, pilot. David Hedison was born on May 20, 1927, in Providence, Rhode Island. At 52 years old, he played John Taylor, the original chief of staff introduced in the pilot episode of Benson. His brief appearance helped establish the political tone of the series before the role was reshaped and recast. The calm authority he projected came from a childhood marked by discipline rather than chaos. Hedison grew up in a stable immigrant household, but structure tightened when he served 18 months in the U.S. Navy at the end of World War II. That period imposed hierarchy, restraint, and obedience, qualities that later defined his screen presence. Not long after, he gravitated toward acting, inspired by films like Blood and Sand, and trained seriously for the stage. Marriage gave his private life continuity as his career expanded. In 1968, Hedison married Bridget Morey, and they remained together for nearly 5 decades, raising 2 daughters while his career moved between television and film. Roles such as Captain Lee Crane in Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea and Felix Leiter in Live and Let Die cemented his image as reliable authority rather than flamboyant stardom. Age eventually slowed, but did not diminish his presence. Hedison continued working into his later years, returning to theater and television with restraint and dignity. Tragically, he died on July 18, 2019, at 92 years old, at his home in Los Angeles, from causes related to advanced age. His estimated net worth was around $2 million, earned steadily across film, television, and stage. His John Taylor was temporary, but his credibility was not. Jerry Seinfeld as Frankie. Jerry Seinfeld was born on April 29, 1954, in Brooklyn, New York. At 26 years old, he played Frankie, a mailroom clerk with unwanted jokes, in Benson. The role barely lasted 3 episodes, but it revealed a voice that did not fit the show's structure. That voice was already restless. Seinfeld's childhood was stable, but his early 20s were marked by anxiety and rejection as he tested himself in stand-up clubs. Nights at Catch a Rising Star brought exposure and humiliation in equal measure. Even while appearing on Benson, he was refining material that depended on control, not ensemble comedy, a tension that followed him onto set. Conflict ended the experiment quickly. Seinfeld was abruptly fired from Benson after creative disagreements, learning he was gone only when no script appeared at a read-through. The dismissal sharpened his instincts, rather than breaking them. Within years, stand-up specials and late-night appearances led directly to Seinfeld, the series that redefined television comedy. Personal stability arrived after fame. In 1999, Seinfeld married Jessica Sklar, and together they raised 3 children, grounding a life otherwise driven by performance and precision. Success multiplied through projects like Comedians in Cars, Getting Coffee, and global touring, all built on creative autonomy. Today, Jerry Seinfeld is 72 years old and remains active as a touring comedian and producer. His net worth exceeds $950 million, with later estimates surpassing $1 billion, driven by syndication and ownership. Frankie vanished early, but the voice behind him reshaped television forever. Bob Fraser as Senator Leonard Tyler. Bob Fraser was born in 1945 in New York City, New York. At about 40 years old, he played Senator Leonard Tyler, the sharp-tongued political thorn in Benson's side in Benson. His presence didn't just add conflict. It gave the show a real-world enemy who could smile in public and stab in private. And that bite on screen came from a man who spent his whole life learning how power really talks. He grew up in New York City with the kind of street-level awareness that teaches you to read a room fast, then respond faster. He pushed toward performance and writing at the same time, because one skill wasn't enough to survive the industry. That early hunger followed him into the work that defined him, running stories, shaping tone, and building characters who felt uncomfortably human, whether in Benson or later in Marblehead Manor. At home, he tried to keep one thing steady. He was married to his wife Bev for 42 years, and people close to him described her as his center, because show running doesn't just steal time, it steals patience, sleep, and peace. While he was juggling rooms full of egos and deadlines, his marriage had to absorb the pressure that cameras never show. Then came the part of his story that turns brutal. In his final years, Fraser battled melanoma that spread aggressively. Treatment became the new schedule, pain became the new background noise, and the control a creator lives on started slipping away day by day. Bob Fraser died at 66 on July 12, 2011 in Los Angeles, after that melanoma spread through his body. His net worth is often estimated around $1 million, earned through years as a writer, producer, actor who helped keep shows like Benson running, then left behind a legacy that still feels sharper than the jokes. Time changed the faces, but it didn't soften the stories. Benson, 1979, began as a sharp political comedy, yet by 2026 its cast tells a far heavier truth. Careers rewritten, lives redirected, and losses no script could plan. What do we really see when we look back now? Familiar characters, or the hidden cost of surviving Hollywood? If this journey surprised you, like the video, subscribe for more then and now stories, and turn on notifications, because the next cast you thought you knew may be even harder to recognize.